Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark here, your host of the Dr. William Clark podcast. Glad to be with you guys for another episode. This is the podcast that talks about how to simplify your fundraising approaches to raise serious money, and glad to be your host today. Super excited about what we're going to be talking about. We've been talking about in this particular podcast series over the past couple of weeks, the importance of how to raise $100,000 in 6 months or less for your new nonprofit. And for newbies who are just now doing this, getting the hang of it, really exploring this for the first time, this can be a challenging topic. But I've been excited kind of walking through this with you guys and all that goes into it. And so I'm super excited to continue the conversation today. Before we jump into our topic today, I want to let you know that this particular podcast recording, this live recording, and this Clubhouse session is being brought to you by the Nonprofit Fundraising Masterclass. This masterclass was created for nonprofit leaders by nonprofit leaders with the express purpose of simplifying your fundraising approaches and results. And if you're looking for that type of coaching, then we recommend that you go ahead and apply to join this masterclass. If you want to submit your application, you can simply go to nonprofitfundingstrategies.com. Again, that's nonprofitfundingstrategies.com. All right, so last week we started this journey. We covered a number of topics. I'm going to kind of continue the conversation. How do you raise $100,000 in 6 months or less? There are a number of ways to do this, a number of ways to skin the cat. And certainly, we are taking our time going through this. But today, I want to talk about how to raise $100,000 by building a program funders want. So this can be really interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all in this business. We're doing what we do because we want to run a program. We want to develop a program. We want to raise the type of money we want to raise because of the programs we have on our hearts and our minds to complete and to pursue. However, it goes without saying, and maybe we should say it, right, that some of the programs we desire to build, some of the programs that we want to create aren't necessarily fundable. And in many cases, funders do not find them attractive. So this can create a significant challenge for a number of people because they've put their heart, soul, and mind into creating a program or thinking about a program, and the program that they're thinking about won't meet the needs of funders, nor will it meet the needs of the community who ultimately they're looking to benefit from this particular service or program. With that being said, it's important to kind of go through a thoughtful process of how to build a program funders want to fund that will yield $100,000 in 6 months or less. All right. And I want to make sure that we walk through this slowly but surely. And then I'm going to invite a few guys up to the stage to kind of share your thoughts, ask your questions, etc. And if we have enough time, we'll go through kind of a live consultation. But there are a couple of points I'm going to share here under this idea. You can build a program that funders want to yield $100,000 in 6 months. Number one, you got to identify your customer, right? What is your customer demographic? What's their age? What's their stage in life? What barriers are they dealing with? What challenges are they looking to overcome? Have they been through programming before? What do they need? What do they want? What do they need? And what do they want? And I want to stress that particular point, right? What do they need and what do they want? Because a lot of times we begin building programs not based upon what the customer says. The customer automatically tells you what they need and want from your program. And what we have to be consistent in is our ability to listen to the customer and provide the exact program that they are looking for. If we are in the business of providing programs that feel good to us or providing programs that we wish we had when we were growing up, we're missing the point. Remember, a nonprofit is a business. And even though the people who are taking your program or joining part of your program or are taking part in what you have going on are not paying for the service, they are indeed the paying customer. And what does that mean, Dr. Clark? Well, ultimately, every customer that shows up in your program, every customer that attends a session, a workshop, etc., while they pay nothing, they are valuable and valued at a specific dollar amount. This is not meant to degrade or demean your customer, but it's the truth. How do we calculate this? When you look at a mature program that does similar work that you are doing, and you look at what they are funded to do, the amount that they are funded to do divided by the number of people that they serve or the number of people that complete their program gives you a per person value of what your customer is worth when it comes to pursuing funding. This is important to know because when you are requesting dollars, when you're building a multi-year budget for your organization, you want to be able to know what you're talking about. For the sake of argument, right? Let's take $100,000 and let's say that you have committed to serving 30 people, but 20 people is your goal completing your program, right? So you can either look at $100,000 divided by 30, which tells us that your customer value is at $3,333.33. Or we can look at the value of 20 people and what's that value? So even $5,000. And this tells you if you have found success serving 30 but 20 are graduating from your program successfully, that it will cost literally $5,000 to run your program successfully. Where does the money go? Well, the biggest expense is going to be staff running the program supplies, program overhead, etc., etc. When you add up all of the costs there, and what you're able to pay and what you're able to afford, this is what it costs, $5,000 per person. And this is going to help you with negotiations, with budgeting, with prepping, with responding to RFPs, etc. This will also give you perspective in terms of how to compete. How are other organizations competing? Well, they charge $3,500 per student, and I charge $5,000 per student, and yet they always get the grants. Going cheap is not the solution. That's definitely not the solution. Going cheap is definitely not the solution. The solution is scale. That's a totally different ball game. That's a totally different situation. That's a totally different setup. And so you cannot compete with scale, nor should you try, especially in the early stages. So number one, identify your customer. Number two, specify the services that you will provide to your customer. What are the outcomes and the KPIs that you will be providing to your customer? How do you know that you're successful? How do you know that you've reached goals that are relevant to your funder, that are relevant to the customer, that are relevant to the community, that are relevant to all the stakeholders who care deeply about the work that you are engaged in? Those KPIs are important. And for those of you who are new to this, KPIs that you want to focus on are KPIs that are industry standards. So when you look at the type of work you engage in, the type of customer you serve, look at what's normal, what's normalized in the industry and amongst other providers. How are they measuring success? Number three, identify other providers who provide similar services that you provide. Look at their program and refine your design so that you can compete. Okay? Evaluate their program and then refine your program design so you can compete. This is important because it's easy for newbies to say, well, nobody's doing what I'm doing. I'm not sure about that. You need to verify that. Or newbies say, well, there are others who are doing this, but they're not doing it well enough because the community said. Well, that's a hard argument to make because the community may say what they're saying to you, and quite frankly, whoever's saying that to you does not represent all the community. But even though people are saying what they're saying, there are still tons of people going to that competing organization, getting the services that they need, getting the services that they want, and they are satisfied to the point that they have not stopped going. So you have to look at other providers, particularly those who are bigger, better, more mature than you, so that you can look at what they're doing. How are they serving the customer? What type of services are they providing? What type of outcomes are they measuring to ensure their success? Number four, from there, this is the other reason why you want to look at other funders, other program providers. Identify the funders that support the work of your competitors. This is how you find who's funding the work. This is how you start to plot and plan your strategy to compete and to invite other funders to support your work and the work that you're engaged in. This is how you do it. This is exactly how you do it. You got to look at who's funding the leaders in the industry, and you got to figure out why are they funding them? What is the secret sauce? What is the benefit? Why is it a winning recipe for that particular funder to support the work of that competitor? Don't be a hater. Be a congratulator. Learn the game. Number 5, once you do all this stuff, reevaluate all the information you have collected, and again, go back and refine your program. I'm not suggesting you tear up your program. Just simply refine the program. Go back through the process and refine what you got going on with your program. And then lastly, number 6, this is the answer to the question: how do you build a program to raise $100,000 in 6 months or less? Number 1, if you're going throughout this process, there's a piece in here that requires you to do a lot of extensive research, and I think you've been able to pick that up. But this is where you want to partner. Figure out who you can partner with, particularly individuals or organizations, who are already doing this work, who are already knee-deep in this work, who are already committed to this work, but they have a pain point that cannot be fixed by their own doing. The pain point that they have can only be fixed by another partner who already understands this work, who already is doing this work, who's already interested in this work, etc. This is where you add value. When you start to string together a number of subcontracts and partnerships with these other organizations who are doing similar work, and you've done your research, you present yourself as an opportunity to help them solve their problem, but you also put yourself in position to raise serious money for your nonprofit. String them together, a bunch of subcontracts, working with some of your competitors, some of your partners, some of your frenemies, and you are well on your way in 6 months to raise $100,000 for your nonprofit organization. So that's it. That's the formula, guys. With that being said, I want to reset the room really quickly. My name is Dr. William Clark. I'm a nonprofit fundraising strategist. I help nonprofit organizations simplify their fundraising approaches so that they can raise 6 and 7 figures for their programs. And this particular room and this live podcast recording is brought to you by the Nonprofit Fundraising Masterclass. This masterclass was created by nonprofit leaders for nonprofit leaders with the express purpose of simplifying their fundraising approaches. And if you need that type of coaching and consulting, then this particular masterclass is for you. If you want to go ahead and apply, go to nonprofitfundingstrategies.com. Again, that's nonprofitfundingstrategies.com. Or just simply tap on my photo there and shoot me a direct message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at DrWilliamPClark, and my team and I will be glad to get the application out to you. We're going to pause here and welcome you all to the show. Glenn, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Monday. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. So what's your question about this topic in terms of raising $100,000 by way of building a program funders want to fund?
Well, I think you're absolutely right in the way you approach it, and especially, I loved what you said about collaborating with other like-minded organizations. Institutional funders love to see that. They love to see that, one or more nonprofits are working together. I think the other comment that I would add is, more on the fundraising strategy side, and I've seen this happen time after time. So many new nonprofits think they're just going to write a bunch of grants, or they're going to do a gala or a dinner or some sort of special event to raise money, which, can work. But I think for sustainability purposes, folks who are new in this space really need to, look at raising money from individuals. And as well as anyone, 80% of the money in this country is coming from individual donors. And I think, starting out, talking to those people who care about the issue that you're working on, people people, who represent people you're serving, being able to talk to them about what you're trying to accomplish and getting them to come on board as investors is a really sustainable way to grow. I have a client right now that's a 20-year-old organization working with kids, and they were raising money exclusively from events, even 20 years in, and they came to us. They were in a lot of pain because they were a board-driven organization, and they were on the brink. And thankfully, we were able to help them before COVID hit, because they probably would have gone out of business. So that's my advice to people who are starting. Don't get caught in the event trap. And now I'm done.
Yeah, Glenn, if you can stay on stage here.
Sure.
I appreciate you adding that value, and I absolutely agree with the idea of nonprofits becoming sustainable. I think it's not the wave of the future; it's right now. Um,
Yeah.
and so when you talk about that particular customer, helping them, what are some ways that you advise nonprofits to evaluate sustainability and income diversity, even now as COVID is, in theory, starting to lighten up? What are you advising clients these days to do?
So, one of the things that I advise people to do is think about, what we in the industry call, a middle donor program. And I've had a lot of success with this of, talking to individuals, talking to couples, and asking them to give $100 a month on their credit card. And using, one-on-one outreach or small house party fundraising where you talk about the program and make the case and get people to join. It's very accessible for people to do $100 a month on their credit card, and it's also sustainable because once they start doing that, if you're doing the right communications with people, you're showing your investors the impact you're having, they're going to stick with you. The other thing I always say is, when I go to Target to buy paper towel, it's going to cost me $100 because you can't get out of Target for, just buying paper towel. You're going to buy everything else that you see there. And when you put it in that context, it's like, oh yeah, I get that,
Totally get it. Yep.
I call it the Target factor, or Home Depot, or any of these big box stores, Walmart, whatever, wherever you go shopping, you're not going to buy one thing. So, I have found that to really be a way to sustain these things. And that group I mentioned before, that was serving kids, that's one of the ways they pivoted, and they're doing really, really well with it. They're doing really well with it. So that's something that I really strongly consider. I suggest people consider.
Glenn, I appreciate that tidbit there, right? I advise the same thing, and oftentimes in this particular podcast, private consultations with my clients, I advise them to do the same thing. I call them listening parties. We did a session last week where we talked about having people on a payment schedule where people are paying every time they get a paycheck is almost like a tithe to the nonprofit, right? It's not about the percentage, it's about the consistency. If you get paid every 2 weeks as a new founder or a board member, it's advisable to consider giving your gift or your donation every 2 weeks. It's a direct deposit to the nonprofit. If it's $75 every 2 weeks and now help you meet your personal quota outside of just whatever you need to be doing as a board member, it's just smart, right? We're already doing it where we're saving that way. We're meeting our own personal financial goals that way. And then if you have a cause that you really care about, it's really advantageous to do the same thing and treat them the same way and direct deposit funds every couple of weeks into their account.
Yeah, and when you do that, especially if you're a board member, you're demonstrating leadership, and
yes.
It gives you the credibility to go out and ask other people.
Absolutely. You know what, Glenn? Let's go there because I agree with you. I co-sign that concept about the credibility, right? I tell my clients, Glenn, that it's you as the founder and board member setting the cultural standard of giving. So
yes.
walk us through, and maybe you and I are having this conversation publicly, right? And I appreciate you staying on stage with us in the podcast. Walk us through like the logic of showing leadership and setting the cultural tone of giving when you decide to do this as a board member or even as the founder of the nonprofit organization.
I'm gonna share a story as a way to answer that. Years ago, I was working for a community health center, and this was in Boston, and we were fundraising at this level, at this $1,200 a year, $100 a month, and I remember sitting down with this guy who was I knew him tangentially in the community. We weren't friends, but he had given to this organization, but we were peers. in the community. You know, we were both about the same age and, you know, probably similar resources. And I sat down with them, and because I was doing it, I was giving at that level as the development director, I could have that conversation with him. As opposed to having a conversation with somebody, you know, who, you know, makes, you know, 50 times more what I make, and you know, is playing at a different level. So I think that, and it you know, and it, for me, it how do I want to say this? It was kind of exhilarating, because I was really passionate about what we're doing. And if you're a founder, you obviously are very passionate about what you're doing. And if you can say, I'm doing this, I'm giving this, you know, $100 a month in addition to everything else that I'm doing.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a joy.
Absolutely.
That comes in asking people to join you, asking people to give, because at the end of the day, you're helping people.
Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, the last point I'll make is, and I don't think everyone really stops and thinks about this, but as most of us, as human beings, we need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We need to give. There's a human need to give to others. And there's a real joy that comes from that. And so it's not as though we're begging for money or asking people, you know, we're taking food off somebody's table. We're providing them an opportunity to be big, you know, involved in something bigger than themselves. And as a founder, you've got that authority, you've got that platform to make those statements.
Absolutely, Glenn. I agree with you. I think, especially when you do a listening party, when you are inviting family and friends to hear your heart, and to close with that ask. You know, maybe it's a ridiculous number, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. The cool thing is, you have the power of persuasion when you say, "I'm already doing it. I've been doing it." And here's the other thing I told my clients too, Glenn. You know, one of the persuasive arguments about this is to tell your family and friends that if they just simply stop over shopping on Amazon, stop going to Starbucks, right? Like stop going to Target and spending $100 on paper towels, you'll have the money to give every 2 weeks to help these children who are in need, or to help these single mothers, or to help these returning citizens, or to help the target group. The money is there, and you have to teach your donors how to give to you.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, and the other tip that I give to people when they're building these kind of programs, and especially if they're doing listening parties or house parties or however you want to structure it, you know, if you've got somebody that you can approach for a $10 or a $15 or a $20,000 match challenge, people love that.
Yep.
And that, you know, that helps you get to that 100,000. So it's, you know, when I look at a goal of something like that, it's like, break it down and figure out the different pieces. Like, all right, how many people do I need at 1,200? You know, how many do I think I can get? Where's that going to take me? You know, if I had a challenge grant, you know, how much closer is that going to take me? And then I think, you know, I also think starting there, before you go to institutional funders, it strengthens your story. With institutional funders, whether you're going to go to a local community foundation, or, you know, some other foundation, or even a corporate entity, you know, with an idea, you know, it's a much stronger story to tell those funders that, hey, look, you know, we've raised this much, and this is how we're doing it, and this is how it's going to be sustainable.
Absolutely.
This is what our board is doing, and how engaged they are.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I think that is just good wisdom and good information. Any other thoughts, Glenn, to share before we close out this room?
You know, I guess the last thought I would share, you know, not knowing, you know, who's in the audience and what their level is, you know, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Because we're not asking for ourselves. We're asking for the people that we're serving, and you've got to be fearless about this. You got into this for a reason. There was something that motivated you to do this work. You've got to share that passion with other people, and and be fearless about it.
Awesome. Glenn, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast recording today, and I think you shared some really, really powerful gems today, guys. And as we wrap the room today, I just kind of want to reiterate this point about raising $100,000 in 6 months via building quality programs. You got to listen to the people that you're trying to serve. Simple as that. You can't put yourself in a position where you're creating this thing and you haven't done your evaluation, you haven't done your positioning, or even listened to the right people who you're trying to serve, right? And even as Glenn and I talked about raising money from individual donors, which we talked about last week in our Clubhouse session, how to do that and how to make that happen. It's difficult to make that ask and to make that sale when you are not listening to the people you're trying to serve. But when you've done the work, you've done the research, you know what's going to work, you know what's needed in this particular situation, and you know how your customer is going to respond to the needs that you have, then you have a stronger case. You have a very strong case to say to your funders and supporters, we would love your support at X dollars every week, every 2 weeks, however Glenn and I talked about it, to do this. And doing this will be very, very specific. You'll have a very specific ask of your donors, and you'll have a very specific way they can give to support this ask. Guys, this is Dr. William Clark. Glad to have you part of the podcast. Let you know before we close, if you want to join a nonprofit fundraising masterclass, we have some seats available just for you. Just simply go to nonprofitfundingstrategies.com. Again, that's nonprofitfundingstrategies.com. Submit your application today, or just shoot me a DM, and I'll be glad to send you the link to the application. This is Dr. William Clark, and this is Nonprofit Funding Tips. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.